Our Father. Make us worthy, Lord, say thankfully. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord, thine is the kingdom, power, and glory now. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Welcome, everyone. We're following on our Christology piece of the creed. When we say Christology is the study of who Christ is, in answer to the question that Jesus said, who do people say that I am? And then eventually he said, who do you say that I am? So that the answer is in Christology, who is Christ? So there is something there that we need to kind of look at. So when the church looks at Christology, we ask the question, and Jesus asked the question, who is Christ? He's much more than the human being that lived in Israel 2,000 years ago and was crucified, and his life ended by him moving away from our realm to heaven and living there forever. There is much more than that, much, much more. So it's really important. I cannot tell you how important it is to actually ask that question for ourselves. Who is Christ? And the study of Christology is a systematic theological answer to the question, who is Jesus Christ? In this chapter, we continue what we started last time, and there was the church divided two major times after, debating who Christ is. And the first and the second, the two times were actually should not have happened. And we're going to see today what went on after the first schism. So we start with the question, what's heresy? What's a heresy? What's a schism? Sorry, this is not baptism, a schism. What is schism? What's heresy? What's schism? What happened in the Chalcedonian churches after Chalcedon? I wish that you have the same interest. You are intrigued by that question. Like, what happened to Rome and Constantinople after they split from us, or after they kicked us out? What was going on? Was it that easy? So you kind of actually canceled two big groups of Christians from the church and say, bye, see ya, we don't want you here. And that's it. When did the following denominations appear? And I'm going to talk about when did denominations appear? Just going to say that, Christian denominations. I'm talking here about like Methodists, Presbyterians, Anglican, and Episcopalian. You say Pentecostal, Baptist. Baptist big is here. They're very big in America. When did they appear? How they are not that part of the big church of the Apostolic Church? And what do they believe in relationship to our church dogma? And if we have some friend, let's say this is an intriguing question. So say Mina likes a girl in his college who is very attractive young woman who is a good Christian, but she turned out to be a Baptist. And Mina's interested in marrying this girl. Let's say her name is Jackie. So Jackie is a very strong Baptist, very active in her church, and Mina asks Abuna, can I marry this girl? Can she come to church and take communion? And Abuna has to be ready. Or he's actually his servant in fellowship. We're going to have to be ready to answer that question. What does Jackie need to do for her to be married to Mina without Mina leaving his church? So these questions are extremely important, and it's very practical. And if you ask me, I'm going to tell you, you must know that, even if you're not teaching Sunday school. So let's start with the first question. What's heresy? And what's schism? Schism is split of the church without heretical teaching. We call our split from the Chalcedonian as schism because we don't really believe, deep down, reality is, we don't believe that any of the sides of the Chalcedonians and non-Chalcedonians were actually heretical. We just disputed over definitions and terminology. maybe some people in the Greek church and the Chalcedonian church would think that what we insisted on is heretical, but we really didn't have any heretical teaching, even by today's review of history. We don't really think we were. And the heresy is erroneous teaching that which is not mainstream teaching, like something that the main church does not teach, something against that. So heresy is much more dangerous than schism, although both of them would lead in the same direction. So last thing we talked about that the at Chalcedon, remember we said there are 4 councils. 3 of them we acknowledge: Nicaea, Constantinople, and Ephesus. The 4th we don't consider as canonical because in that Council of Chalcedon, dispute over the terminology, over the definition who Christ is, made the 2 parties, one side was the Copts and the Syrians, and the other side was Constantinople and Rome, and each side insisted on their formula. We wanted to follow St. Cyril's formula, and they added something new, and we were very much fighting over it. So what did we say last time? Said the Chalcedonians said this, and pay attention to the words. Jesus is one person in 2 natures. And we said the preposition here is in. What does that mean? That he still has 2 distinct natures in himself, but he's one person. That's what the Chalcedonian would say. We would say, no, Jesus is one person of 2 natures. Mean there were 2 natures theoretically in my mind, but once Jesus incarnate came to the womb of St. Mary, it becomes a one, and we call it composite nature. We're almost saying the same thing, but we're trying very, very hard to push against Nestorius, who said Jesus is 2 persons, trying to push hard against that. And they are very offended by what we call monophysites, when a person that really hurt us big time, his name is Eutychus, who said Jesus was only divine. Humanity was not something real in him. It was a fake humanity. He pretended to be human, something we definitely refuse and reject. So they said one person in 2 natures. We say one nature, one person of 2 natures, and we say then the nature that's in Jesus now is a one composite, like of 2. So what happens after the schism? They excommunicated Pope Discourse, our Pope, and the Syrian delegates. And they actually, the minutes of the Chalcedon, the council in Chalcedon, was that excommunication of Pope Discourse was on management basis, not on belief. What do you mean? Apparently, Pope Discourse made a mistake. What is the mistake he made? He accepted the heretic, his name is Eutychus, without examining him really good, because he was belonging to Antioch. And the Bishop of Antioch complained about him and excommunicated him. He came running to Pope Discourse and said, they excommunicated me because I love the Church of Alexandria. I follow the teaching of Alexandria. Pope Discourse, without examining the case, he returned him back to his rank. And then the Patriarch of Antioch screamed and said, look what Discourse is doing. Instead of talking to me and asking about what happened, he returns this man that I excommunicated. And then the council said that Pope Discourse was wrong. He should have examined it. And based on this, they actually degraded him and excommunicated him. And with him, the whole Coptic Church and the Syrian Church. So what happened after? We have 2 groups now. Rome and Constantinople, they call themselves Chalcedonians, and Egypt and Syria, which are the Oriental, or the non-Chalcedonians. We know what happened with us. We have our history. But what happened to Rome and Constantinople? They went on to have 4 more councils. So we know 3, and they have 4 more. So the total of the councils in the Chalcedonian side is 7, with a small synod in between. You cannot call it a council, but a synod. So let's go to the Chalcedonian church after Chalcedon. Rome and Constantinople had 4 more councils, and let's name them. The first one is, after we said the 3 we know, Nicaea, Constantinople, Ephesus. Then they had Chalcedon, which we didn't accept in 451. Constantinople the second, I'm going to say call it the second because that's not the first one. Constantinople II in 553 AD. Constantinople III in 680. These are councils that we don't really consider. It's not in our part. In 680, that's 7th century. Then Nicaea the second, which is in 7, that's 8th century. And this we're going to talk about it at the end. So you have total of 7 councils, including Chalcedon itself, which divided the church. We call it the Lesser Schism. Before eventually splitting in the Great Schism in 1054 in the 11th century. The 7th council, I'm going to say, the 7th council is very specific, different. It's different thing. The 7th council, in their mind, belongs to what we call the iconoclastic movement. Started with the rise of Islam, when Muslim people were converted, but they refused icons. They didn't want to have icons. Christians from a Muslim background, they think of icons as idols. And this was a big deal at the time. We didn't have to deal with it. None of the Coptic or the Syrian church had to deal with the iconoclastic movement. It was the dealing with the Chalcedonians. So let's go through the councils. I want you to have an idea. It's important you know exactly how the Chalcedonians think. Yes. 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 So the small schism is us and the Copts and the Syrian and the Armenian on one side versus Rome, that's Roman Catholic, and Greek. Now they are going to divide themselves into what we call the because Great Schism based on number. Copts and the Syrian are a small number, but the Catholics and the Byzantine are huge number. Like you say, I would say there is in the world today like maybe 250 million, or maybe more, of Orthodox, and 3 billion Catholic. We're talking in billions. Well, what about the Orthodox, Coptic Orthodox, and Syrian Orthodox? 60 million max. So we're definitely the minor schism. We're not the big schism. But still, I'm going to tell you something that's very sweet, actually. You're going to see that. So Chalcedon was under Marcian. It was 451. There were 650 bishops. Condemned the false teaching of monophysitism taught by our Archimedes, a monk, a priest monk named Eutychus, which rejected the human nature of our Lord Jesus Christ. According to this heresy, the divine nature of Christ absorbed the human nature. Jesus was never human. The human nature was absorbed in the divine. And thus we should recognize only Christ's divinity. We should always think of him as God. There is no humanity in him. That's Eutychus. And of course, our church would condemn that. The Coptic and Assyrian churches were wrongly accused of this heresy. This is important for the next council. Why? The people of Constantinople, the bishops of Roman Constantinople said, we have leaned against those. I'm going to try to fix that next time. So they were actually wrongly accused that they were actually believing in this heresy, and their patriarchs were excommunicated with their churches. This was the Lesser and the First Schism. Is that clear? Okay. So the next one, I think we need to go like that, like this. I'm going to have to put this here. Let me fix this. All right. So the next council in the Chalcedonian group is Constantinople II. It convened under an emperor. His name is Justinian. That's a Byzantine emperor or a Roman emperor, Justinian I. It was 165 bishops met to resolve the dispute, and this is interesting. I thought they already condemned the Monophysites, that we are considered part of the Monophysites. But the council actually condemned the teachings of what we call Theodore of Mopsuestia or Mopsuestia, Theodoret of Cyrus, and Ibas of Edessa. These three people, listen to me, these three people were actually the biggest problem with the Copts. The cups pointed the teaching of those three people, and they said, if the Church of Rome and Church of Constantinople are going to accept the teachings of those three, then whatever you say in the council doesn't make any sense because they are very clearly Nestorians. In the Council of Chalcedon, where the dispute happened between us as a church and the Chalcedonians, they said, if you do not condemn the teaching of those three persons, they are actually bishops, you are, whatever you say, it doesn't matter. You are Nestorians because they are very Nestorians. So after they realize that they have done a mistake, now they're coming back to do what? To condemn those three. So the Council of Constantinople is a trial, in my mind, to reconcile the churches again after the big problem that happened in Chalcedon. This is something very, very impressive that the church tried very hard to. So the council condemned the teachings of those three. Their work was known as the Three Chapters and was clearly Nestorian. Their teachings were part of the dispute in the Council of Chalcedon and led to the rejection of the council by the non-Chalcedonians. We rejected the council because of that. This council, Constantinople II, tried to mend the schism by further condemning these teachings, but the rift has been gone too far to repair. The council condemned all three works and also condemned Theodore of Mopsuestia himself as not having repenting. As for Theodoret of Cyrus and Ibas of Edessa, they themselves received pardon. In other words, the council limited censure only to their Nestorian works. Theodoret and Ibas renounced their false opinions and died in peace with the church. Moreover, the council reiterated its condemnation of the heresies of Nestorius and Eutychus. So they tried in this council to bring us back, to bring the Copts back, to bring the Syrian back, but it's too late. There are a lot of enmity. There are actually some murders happened immediately after that. The third council in the Chalcedonian group is Constantinople III. This is under Constantine IV. There was 170 bishops who condemned monothelitism. That's new. I've heard about monothelitism. You know, we always hear about the Greeks calling us monophysites. What's a monophysite again? They believe that we say that Jesus was not human, that he was only divine, and whatever he had done as human was a pretense. That's the true monophysitism. Means there's not two natures, only one nature. So what do you say to that? What would I say to that? Not the creed. Creed will have the creed. All of us, including the Catholics and some Protestants. The Anglican have it. The creed doesn't have the nature of Christ. That is not the creed. That's the confession of the priest. That's what the priest says at the end when the priest lifts up the body and says, Amen, Amen, Amen. I believe, I believe, I believe. He's holding the body in his hand, the paten, and he says that this is the, what we say, that this is the what we say, Amen, Amen, Amen. I believe, I believe, I believe, and confess to the last breath that this is the true body that your only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, have taken from Our Lady, the mother of all, the queen of us all, Saint Mary. Listen to this. He made it one with his divinity without mingling, without fusion, and without alteration. What do I mean by that? Like he made his body one with his divinity without mingling, without confusion, without alteration. What am I saying? And the image he's given, Saint Cyril says, gives. So we say, what is first one? Without confusion. What's mingling? Confusion. What's mingling? Is salt and sugar. When you put salt, so we're thinking about divinity and humanity. How do you come together to become one? Salt and sugar. You're gonna have no way of distinguishing in your mouth between salt and sugar. If you feel the two tastes combined together, it's not very easy to kind of distinguish them. How about alteration? Alteration is chemical reaction. They change. You put vinegar and baking soda. Can you find vinegar anymore? It doesn't really. There's no acidity in there. And then baking soda is alkaline. There's no acidity. You test it, it's not acid, it's not alkaline, it's something new. That's called alteration. How about so we said confusion, alteration, and mingling, confusion, alteration. Confusion. What's confusion? It might be the sugar and salt, but they say this. So it's actually or separation, like oil and water. So what is the example that fits divinity with humanity? Anybody knows? What's the best example? That divinity comes and unites with humanity, and there is no separation, no alteration, no confusion, no alteration, no confusion. What is the example? Example that Saint Cyril gives, and I think it's the best example, is bar of iron heated in fire. How is that example of divinity? Because you have a bar of iron, if this is iron, and I'm heating it until it's red. Iron does not emit light. So if I get this bar of iron in the dark, which is heated up, it actually have light. And it's hot. Iron is not hot. So that the characters of fire is in the bar, but yet it's solid. I can hit with it. So it's solid as iron. So the characters of iron is there, and the characters of the fire is there. The iron did not change the fire, nor the fire changed iron. Got that? But they are in one existence. So it's saying anything else you can try to explain Jesus' divinity, it would have a problem. Okay. So now the next one, which I've never heard about, we never had to answer this question. How about Jesus' well? Did he have one well or two wells? If he's divine and human. The divine will is perfect. The human will has weakness. And they say, okay, look at him at Gethsemane when he says, if it's possible, let this cup pass, but let it be your will, not mine. So the divine will is exactly like the Father, but the human will, we say, again, if we are going to use the same formula, there is actually union of the two wills in composite will. But in this will, the human will always submitting to the divine will. They're going to say the same thing. So they say, yeah, maybe you're not monophysite, but you're monothelite. I say, no, we're not even we're going to say the same thing. We're diathelite. So these two nature possess two wills, in which case the human will is submissive to the divine will. That's what they say. Although the Coptic Church had never addressed the issue, but following the Cyrillian Christological formula, let's say St. Cyril, the same idea of the iron and the fire, we would confess a composite will of the Word incarnate. We say the same thing with nature, same thing with will. It's one will that has a composition of two wills. Again, we're going to say the same thing. They would say Jesus has two wills. We're going to say, no, he has one will of two, composite, together. But always the divine will, the human will is submitting to the divine will. That's what we would say. It's the same language. This council excommunicated a number of persons, including the Roman Pope himself, Constantine, the beginning of trouble between the Greeks and the Catholics. Then we move into that what we call the 26th Synod. What does 26th mean? Sixth mean? The fifth and sixth, something between the fifth and the sixth, which is called the fifth, sixth Synod. This council established canons to guide the church. What did they take? They take 85 canons, we do have them, of the Holy Apostles. They call it the Constitution of the Apostles. The church today is governed by those canons, and the canons of the ecumenical councils, and they have local councils too. Moreover, it condemned the innovation of the Roman Church on grounds that these changes were not in agreement with the spiritual decisions of the ecumenical church. What is the innovation here? So they started the problem with the Roman Catholic already. They said the Roman Catholic decided that priests and deacons should be celibate, should never get married. And then they ordered the strict fast on Saturdays of the Great Fast. And they said people should not eat until like 3 p.m. on Saturdays. And the depiction of Christ in the form of a lamb or in any other form than he appeared on earth. So the three things of innovations the Catholics had done, that this council, again, we're talking about the Chalcedonians, we didn't have to deal with this. We're talking about the Byzantine Church. One, that the priests and the deacons should be celibates. So before that, priest was married, like us. It's in the 7th century that Catholics started to forbid anyone who wants to be a priest from getting married or anyone who wants to be a deacon. Number two, the church, the Catholic Church, Roman, decided that Saturdays in the Great Lent, like today exactly, that people should fast at 3 p.m. And the church never saw that Saturday should be fasted, absolutely. The third is that Jesus can be depicted in a form of a lamb or in any other way, loaf of bread or whatever. And the church had said, no, we should not do that, except what he appeared on earth as a man, a human being. The next council, and this was the last council, the 7th council. Again, these councils are not considered by us. This is by the Chalcedonians. I'm giving it to you as history. You need to know that. This was under Empress Irene, the widow of Leo IV. The 7th Ecumenical Council fought against the heresy of iconoclasm. What happened? Let's hear the story. If you want to know why the Greek have a special icon design, you want to know why the Greeks have a special way of depicting Jesus. You saw the Greek, how they depict their icons? They're almost like copies. They don't have the variation of icons like we have. You can depict Jesus in different ways. They have very specific way of depicting Jesus. Where did this come from? From the 7th Council, their council. So what happened? At the time of the council, iconoclasm, anybody knows what iconoclasm is? Iconoclasm is a movement by with a time, it's a history, and a group of people said icons are worshiping idols. You hear that from time to time now. So how did this come? How did it happen that people started to look at icons as idolatry? This started under the Emperor Leo III. Leo III wanted to convert the Muslims to Christianity. He wanted to have them convert to Christianity and believed it necessary to do away with the veneration of icons in order to convert them. He said one of the biggest problems Muslims have to become Christians is icons. Why don't we just get rid of icons? And we should not venerate them. This heresy continued under his son, Constantine V, and his grandson, Leo IV, who is the husband of Irene. The council resolved to provide holy icons and place them in churches together with the likeness of the life-giving cross of the Lord. The faithful were to honor and venerate, but not worship the icons, ever elevating their souls and hearts to the Lord God, the Theotokos, and the saints who are represented in them. However, after this council, persecution of the holy icons continued under emperors Leo V, Michael II, and Theophilus. Thus, iconoclasm disturbed the church for another 25 years. The local synod of Constantinople in 843 finally restored and affirmed veneration of the holy icons under the Empress Theodora. This council also established celebration of the triumph of Orthodoxy in the first Sunday of Great Lent, which we celebrate in thanksgiving to the Lord of granting his church victory over the heresy of Iconoclasm. So the first Sunday in Lent in the Orthodox churches, the Eastern Orthodox, is called the Sunday of Orthodoxy. And what do they celebrate on this Sunday? The triumph of the icons, that the church actually won this fight. So they call it the Sunday of Orthodoxy. If you go this coming Sunday, to any, I think, Antiochian church, and you would witness that celebration. It's called the Sunday of Orthodoxy. This is the reason for it, that they won the fight against the iconoclasms. Right, got the idea? Okay, now we move to the thing that you would be interested in. I just was talking about Mina being interested in marrying Jackie, who is a girl in his college, but Jackie is a Baptist. And Mina comes to the fellowship and asking his friends and his teacher and saying, guys, can I marry this girl? She's so cool. She's beautiful. and she's godly, and she has all the good qualities. And I want to know, what should I do? Can I bring her? Would you think Abuna would give her communion if she comes? And okay, so if we are going to solve this issue, we have to study what do we say and how we see the different denominations. So let's go through history first. So you started seeing in the last 2-3 councils that Greece and Constantinople, let's say Constantinople and Rome, started to have a problem together. After years of political and doctrinal conflicts between the Eastern Greek and the Western Roman churches, the churches of Rome and Greece completely split, along with their affiliated regions. Roman Pope Leo IX orders Constantinople Patriarch Michael Cerularius to recognize the Church of Rome as the only head of the Mother Church and to accept the Filioque. What's the Filioque? It's a term in Latin, which means Filius. What's Filius? In nomine Patre, e Filius, e Spiritus Sanctus. What did they say? In nomine, in the name of the Father, Patre, e Filius, the Son, e Spiritus Sanctus. Right? So Filius, Filioque means and the Son. So what happened? Roman Pope Leo IX had to add this to the creed, the Nicene Creed. We say in the Nicene Constantinople, it's the Constantinople part. We say, yes, we believe in the Holy Spirit. Say it with me. The Lord, the life giver, who proceeds from the Father. The Catholics added, and the Filioque. Why? In Spain, the heresy of Arius was coming back, and they wanted to establish the divinity of Christ and the equality with the Father. What did they have to do? They say even the Holy Spirit comes from the Son too, to make him equal to. But what happened when you do that? You bring up the Son, but what happens to the Holy Spirit? Comes down, as if the real substance of God is in the Father and the Son, but the Holy Spirit is not. And this was very much rejected by the Greeks. So they added the profession of divinity of the Holy Spirit as an addition to Nicene Creed. The Patriarch of Constantinople refused, and after an outburst at the Hagia Sophia, the delegates delivering Pope Leo's order to Constantinople excommunicated the Patriarch. They went to him. The Pope sent two messengers, and they went to the Patriarch and said to him, Pope, there was no cell phones, there was no telephones, there was nothing. So he sent two people from Rome to Constantinople in Turkey, where the Patriarch of Constantinople still there, and they talked to him. He says, Pope Leo says you have to add the Filioque to the creed. And the Pope Patriarch of Constantinople said, absolutely not, over my dead body. Okay, are you ready for the next one? I said, yeah, I'm ready, whatever you say. Under the whatever, in the name of God and the church, we excommunicate you, Patriarch Julius, and you're in no more considered by us as a patriarch, nor part of the universal church. They cast him, actually, basically cast him out. So, rejecting the doctrine of Filioque and refuses to recognize Roman Pope as the head of the universal church. He says, I will not do that. So what happened? That's happened when 1054. In the same century, or maybe very little later, Russia comes to become an Orthodox. There's a very interesting story about that. Russia was just started to be a kingdom. It was very much divided groups of what we call them. What do you call them? What do you call the language? The Slavic, the Slavs, the Slavics. They're groups of little kingdoms. They came together under, and the man who put them together, either him or his father, was Prince, remember the name, Vladimir. And when Vladimir looked around in Europe, he saw big countries like England, like Belgium, like France. They were all Catholics. And he thought, one thing that makes them very unique is their religion. They have one religion. The Slavs at the time, the Slavics, are actually divided. Everybody has their own religion. And he said, I need a religion for the country. So like a movie, like a story from fairy tales. He said, go find me a religion. Who did he send? His army. He divided his army into groups and said, go find me a religion for Russia. I want the Rus to have a unified religion. So he sent one group to Hungary at the time, another group to Italy, another group to England, another group to, and then a group to Constantinople. The group who went to Hungary, guess what was the religion of Hungary at the time? Hungary now is Catholic, but what was the religion of Hungary at the time of Prince Vladimir? Islam. They came back and said, no, we don't recommend that religion at all. First of all, they're filthy. Second, they don't drink alcohol. And Vladimir said, absolutely, you're right. The Rus cannot live without their vodka. That does not work. So they went to the Catholic Church and said, the Pope has to be in your business. And he said, no, I don't want anybody in my business. But then the group that went to Constantinople, the Byzantine Church knew that they're coming. They put on their best, and then you have to understand them. I'm a big admirer of the Byzantine Church and the way they make their churches. They said the minute we stepped into Hagia Sophia, the big cathedral, we felt like we were not on earth. We were slapping ourselves to just make sure that we still have bodies. We felt like we're in heaven. And the music and the colors, and it's just heavenly. And they were actually so inspiring that we didn't want to leave. So I said, bring whatever you can so we can establish this. So here you understand that Russia immediately in the 11th century, 10 something, adopted the Byzantine rite from Constantinople and became part of they came after the Chalcedon, came after all the problems between the Catholics and the Greeks. They came after everything, and they started the Renaissance. Russia became very, very pious people, and they inspired the world by their monastic, especially monastic life. I would recommend you to read about their saints. Anyway, so in this century, 1054, the Great Schism, we call it the Great Schism, between the Byzantine Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholic Church. And that when the Roman Catholic Church called itself Roman Catholic Church. And then after that, so we go fast forward 300 years or 400 years. What happens? What happens when somebody gets absolute authority? Absolute authority. The Pope of Rome and Vatican gets absolute authority. More than that. And have you ever heard about absolute power? What does it do? There's a saying, there's an idiom. You say, absolute authority corrupts absolutely. You give someone absolute authority without checks and balances, what happens? They corrupt it very beyond repair. And that's why you reach a point where there's total chaos in the Catholic Church. They're craving so much power, they're craving so much pleasure, and they lose everything. And after years of political and doctrinal conflicts between, that's the Great Schism. So the Roman Catholic papacy and its clerical practices triggered anger from the Catholic congregation towards the church. Everybody hated the church. Unbelievable. Yet they wanted God, they desired to be closer to God, but the church pushed them so much. I'll give you an example. Because of the authority, craving authority, there was a family. There's groups of family in Italy that craved power. So to get power, what would they do? A rich merchant who's a very rich person have a boy and a girl. When the boy grows, he send him to the monastery to be a monk, and he's going to pay for him to be a cardinal and going to pay for him to be a pope. And the girl, he would groom to be the wife of the king. Actually, one of them actually had one pope and one king from his children, and it's all done by money. So what do you think? How is the church going to be run? How you run a church like that? So the selling of indulgences, so they started to also have another problem. The Pope is a religious authority in Europe. He has a king in England, he has a king in France, a royal family in France. He has another king in Italy. He has a king. Every country in Europe has a king, and they're very rich. So the kings will not listen to the Pope because they pay him. They give him the gifts. So the Pope said, I need something to establish my authority. So he had to build a bigger church than the churches of England and church of, he had to be much bigger to impress people. So they needed to build a new church. Constantine built them, St. Peter Basilica. It's a beautiful church, but small. So one of the popes in the times of Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci and those big guys, they needed to pay them money. You know what it means to hire Michelangelo to paint your palace? You have to make him, live rich. So once you hire this person, you're dedicating to him a budget of a country. So how would you build a church like that? A huge church. They said, listen to me. If you watch something was done in the Millennium, it's called the Millennium by CNN. It's a show made to document all the events that happened in 1,000 years. And in that 1,000 years, this St. Peter Basilica was built. So in St. Peter Basilica in Rome, if you have not been there, I've been there. If you go and put the Statue of Liberty, the whole Statue of Liberty with its column under the dome of St. Peter Basilica, 1/4 of the space will still be empty. You understand how big that is? St. Peter Basilica is a humongous building, all with marble, gold, gems, you name it. It's made to be very, very impressive. There's statues on St. Peter from the outside. As you're going, there's an arc like this. You're coming through and you see all the apostles looking down on you. If you're a king, you're humbled. You're going to have to really look up to see those impressive sculptures. Anyway, so they needed the money. They said they flattened the church, the Pope flattened the church, and they want to start from grounds. So they said before they even go on with the walls, they ran out of money. So what we're going to do? He had one of the cardinals give him the basis for the indulgences. What's the indulgences? Anybody knows? Indulgences? Have you heard the word? What's the indulgences? No, that's not what I'm talking about. Indulgences are receipts the church has that saints have enough righteousness to cover themselves and have extra to cover somebody else. So people go after, in the Catholic mind, they go after they die to purgatory. They stay there thousands of years to finish their cleaning if they've done any wrong. And then if the church has indulgences, we can buy them out. So if you want your grandmother or grandfather to get out of purgatory early, you pay the church certain amount of money, and the church will write you a receipt that they received the money, and this guarantees, because they based it on whatever you lose on earth, it will be loosed in heaven. So if the church receives the money, will get people out of purgatory early. You think Christians in the time were dumb? No, they were not dumb. They hated this. So they hated the selling of indulgences. And the church was collecting the money to build that big church. Especially alarmed the German monk whose name was Martin Luther. Please don't think Martin Luther King. I'm not talking about the African American revolutionary that was fighting for the rights of the black. I'm not talking about him. Martin Luther was a German white monk, Augustinian monk who lived in Germany, who suffered from depression, and he hated this big time. While practicing monasticism, Martin Luther felt that the requirements established by Roman Catholic Church were too much and too great to be achieved. Luther did not believe that salvation could be bought and sold, as was being done by clergy selling indulgences. He felt that salvation is attained through faith in Jesus Christ alone. That's where you have the word alone. This is Martin Luther. And that penance is not necessary. You don't have to beat up yourself or fast or any of that. In response to the selling of indulgences, he nailed his 95 thesis on the church. He nailed a document and he wrote 95 objections to the Catholic Church. A major practice of the Roman Catholics. This is 1517. That's 6th century, beginning of 6th century. This public objection initiated the Reformation. When he nailed this piece of paper, everybody heard about it. He was a Catholic man, a Catholic monk. But then he started rejecting the Catholic Church. An international movement to critique and reform the Catholic Church of its apparent flaws, beginning in Germany with Lutheranism. So the first denomination that you would hear about is Lutherans. If you hear about Lutherans, we have Lutheran church here. There's a big community of German. Do you know the coffee? What's called Hufflepuff or whatever it's called? The coffee in Durham? Goggelpuff. Goggelhoff. It's a coffee shop in Durham. It's very good. They have good pastry. There's a group of German people here living, and they speak accented English, but they have a Lutheran church. Almost 100% of Germany is Lutheran. That's the origin of Reformation. Because of Martin Luther, they call themselves Lutheran. All right, so the Lutheran church is the beginning of the Reformation. All right. Yes. No. They went back. After, see what happened, the Reformation is a big shock for the Catholics. They retreated. They don't do that anymore. They actually think of it as something, a big mistake. But was the Reformation effective with the Catholic? Yes. The Reformation helped the Catholic Church to go back. It was a slap on the hand. As the movement spread, several European nations took advantage of this opposition for the church to fuel their political conflicts with the Roman Pope. There's multiple examples. There was, because the Pope was involved in politics and they hated it. Since the papacy at the time had exercised considerably political influence over the nations and their kings and princes, the deviating congregations of the church began creating their own Protestant denominations that would best accommodate their own beliefs, interpretation of the Bible, and hence the several Protestant denominations existent today. Let's go on through them. The next is what we call the Reformed Church, 1522. The one who behind it and behind the most of the Protestant ideas is Zwingli. Ulrich Zwingli, a Swiss reformer. He hated the selling of indulgences also and dismissed many Catholic beliefs. He actually dismissed some things that we do as simply religious superstitious. So what did he dismiss? Among the many reforms he brought to Christianity, he wanted to end clerical celibacy. And when he was priest of the Zurich Church, he was Catholic priest, acted to break the Lenten fast. He rejected the Lenten fast and rejected any church doctrine or practice that was not directly derived from the Bible, did not believing in the teaching of the interpretation of the church fathers. Among his reforms was his belief that the Holy Eucharist was simply a symbol. In contrast with the Lutheran said, no, baptism is real. The body and blood is real. It's transubstantiation. He said, no, they're symbols. I don't believe that. What happened? Actually, the Protestants started to say, everybody take the Bible, interpret it for themselves. The next movement is the Anabaptist by Gribble, 1520. The Anabaptist comes from the Lutheran and Zwinglian Reformation, but saw flaws in this Protestant movement. They didn't like what was happening. Conrad Gribble, the leader of the movement, believed that the Protestant converts must be rebaptized. Here you got the Anabaptists are the roots of the Baptist, by the way. The converts must rebaptize in order to completely break away from the flawed Catholic faith. He performed the first rebaptism, baptism of an adult who was already baptized in infancy. Here you have the idea of you cannot baptize somebody in their infancy. In Zurich in 1525, giving the denomination the title Anabaptism. The Anabaptists geographically separated themselves from society in order to form a more perfect community in imitation of what they believed to be the community of the first Christians in Acts. They opposed swearing, going to war, had no involvement with politics or the government. Nonetheless, they failed to resemble the early Christians in that they practiced polygamy. You can have a hint of the Mormons in here. And several other Old Testament traditions invalidated through Christ. Mennonites and Amish. You hear about the Amish? You've heard about the Amish? They're in Pennsylvania and Iowa. Amish, you're going to hear about them here. So it's 1536. A leader of the Anabaptist community in Switzerland was Menno Simons, a former Catholic priest from the Netherlands, who later became a founder of the Mennonites in Switzerland. His teachings included questioning transubstantiation, strict observance of what he believed to be the ministry of Christ is service. The Amish and Mennonites completely focus on service, and for this they were persecuted by Protestants and Catholics, so often fled to the neighboring countries rather than fight back. The Mennonites later divided into more denominations, including the Amish in Switzerland, who were led by Jacob, a man to completely reject modernization, to live in highly regulated and isolated community. When I lived in Iowa, they were a community. I've heard about them, the Amish. They rejected anything modern. You will not see a cell phone with them. You will not see an electric machine. They would not actually drive a car. They would come in carriages. They told me in the hospital one day that a man brought his pregnant wife to deliver, and she delivered in the carriage because he was driving a carriage. And she had to give the baby in the birth. They call it Amana Colony in Iowa because of the man that who found it. So those are the Amish, and this part of the Anabaptist community, but they go into seclusion. They don't want to mix with the people. There is a movie done by Harrison Ford. It's called, I think, The Fugitive, where he hides in an Amish colony. Calvinism, that's a big one. Calvin replaced Lutheranism as dominant Protestant force in France, Netherlands, and Scotland. Calvinists believed in divine predestination. This is the big thing, that God has ordained everything for everybody. Nobody can do anything outside God's plan. You cannot change it. You're either going to be saved or you're going to be damned. If you're saved, you're going to be saved no matter what you do. You're damned, you're going to be damned no matter what you do. So that's Calvin's way of thinking. The founder believed in sovereignty of God and necessity of humans to surrender their will to his. In Bern, there were constant revolts against the Catholic Church. Calvin was invited to stay in Geneva and to convert to the Catholics. Geneva eventually became independent of Bern, and they formed a Calvinistic organized society with pastors, deacons, teachers, and elders. Geneva was considered to be a safe haven and beacon to persecuted Protestants by the Catholics. I'll come to the cherry on the cake. That one is really big. Okay. I would recommend for you, if you ever want to study this, to watch a very beautiful movie. I learn a lot from movies, and quicker than learning from books, if I have the ability to have a movie. There's a movie called A Man for All Seasons. Such a beautiful movie. It's about Thomas More. So Thomas More was in the time of Henry the Eighth, King Henry the Eighth of England. Oh yes, it's the saint that the church is named after him in the school. Thomas More is a saint because he was a Catholic who stood against the Protestant change in England. And I would advise you, if you don't really learn anything about any other movement in Protestantism, to learn about this one. So King Henry the Eighth was a devout Catholic. He even wrote books defending the Pope and defending the sacraments. Okay, he was married, and he had a child who was a girl, Elizabeth. She's Queen Elizabeth I. Right? You have Elizabeth II, who died recently, but Elizabeth I was his only daughter. His wife never gave him boys, and he hated it. He was boiling inside. He was a great friend of the Pope, the Catholic Pope, and a devout Catholic, but yet he yearned for a male child to keep his name. So he couldn't get a male child. So he went to the Pope and asked if he can divorce his wife and get another wife, thinking that the reason for him not having a boy is his wife. And Pope said no. And the reason why, I think some people say the Pope actually was related to his wife. Not that the Pope was actually like it's one of his family. So he hated the idea that the queen will be divorced and let go just because she cannot get a boy child. Do you know in biology who is responsible for boys and girls? The man, not the woman. Sad. It's very sad because the man has the Y chromosome. All right, and that emphatic, anger about the Pope being against him. So what did he do? Listen. In his time, he had the chancellor. His name was Thomas More. What's a chancellor? A head of a Supreme Court in America, like the greatest judge in the whole country. Thomas More was a very devout Catholic and loved the church and loved the Pope and loved God. He didn't separate the two. He was a very wise man. And in England, the law of, how the Fifth Amendment here? What's the Fifth Amendment? You have to know that. Yes. If the police ask you a question or the judge asks you a question, you can say, I plead the fifth, meaning I resort to not answer, to silence. It's England who started this. So Thomas More, in the time of King Henry VIII, so what did he do? He said, forget about the Pope. We're going to separate ourselves from the Catholic Church. I'm going to start actually taking decisions into my hands. I don't need the Pope to tell me to divorce my wife. But I will have the people of England, the British people, sign a survey to say, we want nothing to do with the Pope. We want the king to decide for us what's good for the country, because the king wants a prince. Okay. And everybody looked to Thomas More for an answer, said, you're the judge. We trust you. We trust your word. What are you going to say? And he said, it's a very tough situation because he knew the king. King Henry is very vicious man. If he says anything against the king, what will happen? He would execute him, guillotine. So he said, I'm pleading the fifth. I'm going to be quiet. The king pursued him for a year. When they couldn't find any way to get him to answer the question, the survey was saying like this: we are going to cut our ties with the Catholic Church. We're going to be our own country. We're going to go. You have an archbishop who was a Catholic archbishop belonging to the Pope of Canterbury. Canterbury is the place where the big cathedral in England, and that archbishop will be our patriarch in a way. We're just going to separate ourselves from the Catholic Church. So this is 1534. They call it the Act of Supremacy. And guess what? Thomas More refused to answer. Eventually, after a year, in this movie you will see that, they actually put him in prison, and they paid somebody to come and make a witness against him in the court that he received bribe. A thing in the English court meant execution. And so you get two witnesses to say that, and then and in the movie it's beautiful. He said there's a lot of things in there, how he's talking to his wife and his children, and then at the end he said, I see that you decided to kill me. There was no other way. So if that's the case, let me tell you what I think. So I said it. I'm the only one loyal here to the king because I worry about his salvation. And I worry about the salvation of England, about salvation of you, but you're all cowards. Let the king hear, I am his loyal subject. And no, I disagree with him. You should never cut yourself from the church. They took him from the court and to the guillotine, cut his head. That's how Thomas More became a martyr. So King Henry, got remarried and remarried for 5 more times, 6 times total. And when he finally had an heir, and actually died, I think. So this is not the beginning of the Anglican Church. His daughter, who took over the reign of the kingdom, killed her cousin, Queen Mary of the Scots, because she was Catholic, and she established herself as the head of the church. I met Anglican priests. Anglican here means the Church of England. And they said, we hate it that we are employed by the Queen. So I'm employed by the church, by the Holy Synod, by the Patriarch, by the Bishop. But the priests in the Anglican Church are employed by. So what did they do? Said, let us keep the Catholic form. We are informed Catholics. You're going to have priests dressed like priests. They have vestments to put on the liturgy. They have a liturgy. They have an altar. They have a sacrament. They have baptism. They have everything. But in core, their faith is Protestant. So when I tell you which denomination has a traditional form but Protestant belief, what would that be? The Anglican Church, the Church of England. It didn't stop here. The Anglican Church went out, and the church in the time of Queen Elizabeth and later in Queen Victoria, the rest of them, George and the rest of them, they became um, they were doing expeditions. So the church outside England was called the Episcopalian. Okay. The Episcopalian Church is a branch of the Anglican Church. The Episcopalian Church suffers the most in the times we are. Congregational. This is when the English people started to retaliate. They didn't like that the Queen is the head. They called themselves that the Queen actually said, let us keep the Catholic form. Listen to this. You're going to hear this term, and I want you to know where it comes from. The Puritans. What does Puritan come from? Pure. They hated it that the Queen kept the Catholic form. They wanted to do away with anything Catholic. So the Puritans who came here, actually the first pioneers, the first pilgrims, the first, what do you call them? Pioneers, right? The immigrants to America who came in Mayflower, right? Those were Puritans who ran away from England because they hated that they have some Catholic things, the vestments, the confessions, the liturgy. The keeping that Catholic thing burned some people in England. Said we don't want to do anything with it. We want to be like France. We want to be like Switzerland. The Puritans that migrated to the American colonies very quickly fragmented and formed what we call congregational denomination. No hit. What does congregational mean? What governs the church is the congregation. And then further divided, forming the Unitarian denominations. They refused even the Trinitarian dogma. When you hear Trinitarian, Unitarian, think they don't believe in the Trinity. They only believe in the God of the Jews or the Muslims. The Unitarian movement was a breaking away from the original Puritan root as it believed in what was long ago asserted by Arius. They go back to the Arian heresy. See, this is what I want to tell you. Once you leave the Apostolic Church and you start taking things into your hands, what happens? What's the first thing that gets corrupted? The faith, your dogma. Presbyterians. We hear about Presbyterian here is big. Who's Presbyterian here? Duke. Duke is Presbyterian. He's a Presbyterian or Methodist. I think it's Presbyterian. Trace their origin back to Scotland, where there was an increasing appeal towards Calvinism. In their faith, they belong to Calvin with the predestination. Much like the other Protestant denominations, the Presbyterians do not hold one specific creed or theology, but are open to different interpretations of the Bible. As long as the Bible alone, that's the whole Protestant. One thing the Protestant will keep, sola scriptura, Bible alone. Okay, we come to the Baptist. I want to finish with this before we see the thing. The Baptist denomination is a blend of Anabaptist and Puritan beliefs. They came together. The Puritan and Anabaptist came together, ultimately fragmenting from the Puritan congregational denomination. The term Baptist is known to be a later modification of Anabaptist. Ana meaning twice, because Anabaptists did not believe in infant baptism, so nullified it, making adult baptism the first and only baptism. Unlike in several other Protestant formations, Baptists do not necessarily hold a single established creed, doctrine, or set or ritual, but rather they maintain that each believer is allowed his own interpretation of the Bible as long as it is closely tied to the Bible alone. The only creed Protestants have is sola scriptura, Bible alone. And we see that when that happens, you end up believing in nothing. You end up actually losing your ties completely with God. That's what I see happening. That's why we are emphatic about fighting this. See, this is where the Coptic Orthodox Church actually split, or the Chalcedon one, and then we have the Oriental and the Eastern. This is the beginning of the small schism. That's the small schism. You have two lines here and here. But this line come, and there's the Great Schism. See the Great Schism. After the Great Schism, the Eastern Orthodox Church went on its own, and the Western European Rome is the Catholic Church. What happened in the Catholic Church? the indulgences and the corruption of the Catholic Church led to the Reformation. And the first thing that came in the Reformation came out, here it is, the Lutheran, then Zwingli, then Anabaptist, and then Calvin. And then from the Anabaptist come the Amish and the Mennonites and establishing colonies in the New World. But from the Catholic came also the Presbyterian and the Anglican. Here it is, King Henry. I told about the story that's very interesting. From the Anglican, that's established by Queen Elizabeth, the daughter of Henry VIII, after killing Thomas More and then the other one, Becket, I think, comes the Congregational. They didn't like, they called them the Puritans. They didn't like that they kept the forms. And the Congregational is part of the Puritans that went to America to establish, to live, to run away from the persecution. And from the Congregational and came the Baptist as actually part of the Anabaptist and the Congregational together. And then also from the Anglican Church came the Methodist and the Pentecostal. What's the Pentecostal? They want to go back into speaking in tongues. Every single denomination of those pick one item and they want to emphasize it. So the Pentecostal, let's speak in tongues. We don't have speaking of tongues. How come we don't have a speaking of tongues in the Catholic Church or in the Anglican Church? How come we don't have service? Let's go and do an Amish. How come we have baptism for the children? Let's go and baptize again and make so a very narrow-minded idea about what the church should be. One idea. So what are you going to do with the rest of it? We have no idea. Everybody do whatever they want, but at least keep that one idea. You're a Baptist if you baptize people at old age. What you do speaking in tongues. So what about the rest of the life? He said, we don't really care. As long as you speak with tongue, you are Pentecostal. You see that? Like it becomes like an excitement. You get excited about something. You leave the church for that one thing. And it's still happening today. You go into a Protestant church, you sit there, and one of the people says, we don't have enough service in this church. I don't like it. I'm leaving. Okay? Anybody who wants to have service, let's come with me. What are we going to do the rest of it? I don't know, but we're going to have service. This is how we start a church. So this what happened in the Protestant world. And I love what, what's his name? The Bible scholar, Scott Hahn, he said, I see this exactly as what happened in the time of Israel when they rejected the son of David and they wanted to have a kingdom for themselves and they started breaking until completely disappeared. Yes, the son of David was corrupt, bad, but he is the son of David. Anyway, that's all what we have today. So what you do, maybe we should keep that the next time. What do you do if you have someone from the Baptist or from the Methodist or from the Presbyterians or even an Amish? What do you do if you want to have that man take communion in the church? Let me just quickly say it. Anyone from the Eastern Orthodox, as long as they are from the Eastern Orthodox, Antiochian, Russian, Serbian, Greek, Romanian, you don't need to baptize. You only anoint with Maroon if we come. Catholics, you can say either or. But Protestant must be baptized for sure. When it comes to that, we are Baptists. We're going to baptize anyone who was never baptized by an Orthodox or a Catholic priest. If they were not baptized by an Orthodox or a Catholic priest, they must be baptized. In that case, we are Baptist. If that's what you want to say, we are Baptist, fine. Because we baptize older people because they were baptized by a Protestant denomination. We don't consider baptism valid for one reason. The church has already made the council. We know that. If they don't have the right faith, the fact that they don't believe in communion is a huge thing. That communion to them is not the real body and blood. To us, this is major. We cannot accept anybody who does not have that belief. So this is important. And especially if we're talking about Unitarian, forget it. Okay, so what you do when someone from those churches come to the church, I will not give communion to a Catholic or Eastern Orthodox, not because I don't believe they are actually baptized and real, but because we have excommunications. We cannot be neglecting that the patriarchs had excommunicated each other. But for the Protestant denomination, but they don't need to be rebaptized. They need to be joined to the church with a certain anointment, but the rest of them has to enter the church through baptism. I think that's the short of it. But we're gonna talk about it in questions. You're gonna find it in your questions. I guess that's it. Any questions? Okay, let's go and say our Father. Make us worthy, O Lord. Say thankfully, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord, thine is the kingdom, power, and glory, now and forever. Amen. One more time, the name of the movie that I suggest for this is A Man for All Season. A very old English movie that's tough to listen to, but just pay attention. It's really beautiful story, very well written. Love God the Father and grace His only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you. Even peace be with you.